This is Backstage Sonoma, your all-access pass to the local music scene.
Coming to you from beautiful downtown Santa Rosa, this is the Backstage Sonoma podcast. And now, here's your host, Steve Roby.
Greetings, I'm Steve Roby, and welcome to another episode of Backstage Sonoma. Today we've got an incredible guest. It's none other than Bay Area's own blues legend, Tommy Castro. For decades, Tommy's been a driving force in the blues world, blending gritty guitar riffs with soulful vocals to create his unmistakable sound. Tommy will join me shortly to talk about his career, the Bay Area music scene, and an upcoming show at the Hop Monk Tavern in Novato. But first, let's listen to a sample of his music. Here's Nasty Habits.
Everything I do is bad for me. Everything I do is bad for me. All right. All my nasty habits just won't let me be. I like to drink and I like to smoke. They say it's gonna kill me. That ain't no joke. I said, hey, hey, hey. Everything I do is bad for me. I can't help myself. All my nasty habits just won't let me be. They won't let me alone.
That was Nasty Habits by Tommy Castro, and he joins me now. Welcome to the show, Tommy.
Hey, how you doing, Steve? It's good to be on with you, man. We're looking forward to this gig at the Hop Monk. It's our first time playing these. I think we did a Hop Monk up in Sebastopol one time, but this is the first time we're going to be doing this one in Novato.
They do a really good job there. Let's talk about your career and its impact on the blues scene. Can you share some of your influences that shaped your style, especially any local Bay Area musicians who played a role in it?
Of course, Elvin Bishop. When I was a teenager, I would catch Elvin every chance I got. He would do shows around the Bay Area. Of course, he was a national act and played Woodstock and hit records on the radio, on AM radio back in those days. I had a car with an AM radio in it. I would drive around and I would hear Party Till the Cows Come Home would come on about every 15 minutes when I was in high school. So I was a huge Elvin fan. Of course, Taj Mahal. Taj is from back east, but he lives here in the Bay Area, and the other local musicians that inspired me, of course, would be bands like Tower of Power and
Sure.
Sly Stone, Santana, Cold Blood. I could probably dig up a few more names. I really started, like most people my age, listening to FM radio. KSAN, and then in San Jose, when I was growing up there, it was KOME and KSJO. And that was the beginning of rock radio. It was cool because in those days, they didn't have enough sponsors to fill up all the time. So they were only just playing music most of the time.
That was great.
And they could play anything they wanted to play. The DJs were totally in control of their show. And man, those were good times. But I got exposed to a lot of great music. And that's where really my early influences came from.
What do you consider the most pivotal moment in your career that really solidified your place in the blues world?
You know, maybe going on tour with B.B. King. We did 90 shows, open up for King and Buddy Guy. I think that kind of put us on the map in a certain way. Fortunate enough to wind up on a NBC network television show. It was called Comedy Showcase. And they used to have us just play the bump music in between comics. So it was a comedy show, stand-up comedy show. Everybody did a 6-minute bit. And in between comics, the band would play a little walk-on music, a little walk-off music.
Nice.
And Louis Anderson was the host, and he would throw us a bone every once in a while. So that gave us some national exposure. was on right after Saturday Night Live. A couple of things like that. I would say, again, signed to Alligator Records. Before that, being signed to Blind Pig Records. That's the label that we recorded on originally and really gave us a chance to get a booking agency and leave town and get out on the road, support our releases that way. And then, of course, years later, I signed with Alligator, which has been really great for us. I like where I am with this record label. There's way too many things I could tell you about them. I am happy where I am. They've done a lot for my career. I think the other thing that might have really helped us solidify our spot is the legendary Rhythm and Blues Cruise, believe it or not. For people who are not familiar with that, it's like the main event for blues, especially in our country, but also acts from other countries. It will be booked on there from time to time, and the audience comes from all over the world. But it's become the place that makes and breaks acts. There's a young man, I don't know if you've heard of him, DK Harrell. He went on a blues cruise about a year and a half ago for the first time. Nobody ever heard of him anywhere. He'd been knocking around the South. He lived in Louisiana and did shows all over the South and was making a name for himself, I guess, in his region, but nobody had really heard of him outside of there. And he came on the blues cruise, and all of a sudden, he was booked on every festival all over the world right now, just because everybody saw him on the blues cruise and spread the word. So the blues cruise, it might sound like fun for people who have a little extra money to spend and are into that sort of thing. But as it turns out, it's really one of the great blues events that ever happens all year long. And you'd have to get on there and do it to really understand. We gave away one of those cruises this year. Now, all you had to do was buy a ticket to one of our shows, and you were in the drawing. We pulled a name for that drawing up in June, at the end of June, and gave away a cabin to some lady who was very excited to be going on this October's cruise with us.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your current record. It's called A Bluesman Came to Town. It's a compelling concept album. What inspired the storyline behind this project, and how did you approach creating a narrative within the blues genre?
It was the first time I tried anything like that. It was just an idea, like everything else. Every album that we put out, I generally come up with some kind of a concept. It's not just another batch of songs, or at least that's what I want. I don't want it to just be another batch of songs. I like it to have a theme. And this one, it was probably somewhere like our 18th or 19th or 20th album. And I'm like, man, I put out a lot of records. I've had a lot of good ideas. Well, what am I going to do now? Long story short, came up with this idea to do something like a blues opera, like a rock opera, but with blues music. And it was kind of scary because you had to create a batch of good material, some good songs, and then they had to tell a story. And then they had to actually go in sequence on the record. That was the thing that really I hadn't given much thought to. I knew I had this concept album. I knew I had these songs that all were part of the story. But when it dawned on me, hey, we've got to sequence this album. And that means, what is the order of the songs going to be? Mm-hmm. And now it's got to tell the story.
Right.
At the same time, it has to have the usual flow of an album, variation of tempos and grooves and types of songs. Because we don't just do straight ahead traditional blues all night long. We do some of that. We do some soul music that's basically from Memphis 60s Stax Volt era. Mm-hmm. Soul music is kind of a big influence of mine. It creeps into a lot of our stuff. Also, rock and roll. Grew up on the Rolling Stones and Chuck Berry and Little Richard. And like roots rock and roll. And all of these things, all these elements are in. And all the different styles of blues from all over the country are also influences of our Chicago and Texas and West Coast, Louisiana music. All of those things are in us. When we make a record and create our own material, you have all of those different ingredients. I wasn't sure how this was going to work out. And number one, I had Tom Hambridge, who's probably the top blues record producer in the country. Right now, he does all the Buddy Guy albums. He's worked with everyone from ZZ Top to Joe Bonamassa, all the major acts. Those last two Kingfish albums that came out won a Grammy. One was nominated for Grammy. The last one won a Grammy. That's Tom Hambridge. And so I had him producing and co-writing with me. And I had some good ideas. I had some good songs. I had by the way, I was doing all this work during COVID. So I had a little extra time to spend on everything. Normally, we're trying to fit this work in between tours, between gigs. And this time I had no gigs and no tours. And I was able to really spend some time working out the songs and the music. I think all of those things combined helped me to make this record and have it come out the way it did. It was a combination of all of those elements. Oh, yes, a little luck. That's what I'm looking for. Was I got a little bit lucky with having it all fall together the way it did. And it really did well for us.
Thanks for sharing that story. Let's listen to the title track now. This is called A Bluesman Came to Town by Tommy Castro, and you're listening to Backstage Sonoma.
All he ever knew was a hard life on the farm, plowing in the fields, chopping wood behind the barn. Must be a better way to use these hands and arms. Heard about a roadhouse a mile outside of town. Quitting time on Friday, he laid that pitchfork down. Once he heard that guitar, man, it shook him to the ground. A bluesman came to town, he felt the tug. Bluesman came to town, he caught the bug. The boy breathed in that sound when a bluesman came to town. Johnson, picking on his porch all day, had an old pawn shop guitar, and he taught that boy to play. The music filled his soul ever since that day. Bluesman came to town, he felt the tug. A bluesman came to town, caught the bug. The boy breathed in that sound when a bluesman came to town. Johnson told him, if you want my advice, get the hell out of this town. Go, don't think about it twice. The young boy knew that old man was right. The bluesman came to town, he felt the tug. The bluesman came to town, he caught the bug. The boy breathed in that sound when a bluesman came to town. Bluesman came to town, he felt the tug. Bluesman came to town, he caught the bug. The boy breathed in that sound when a bluesman came to town.
And we're back with my guest, Bay Area bluesman Tommy Castro. Tommy has a rich musical history, and you spoke about it earlier. What's your take on the current blues scene here and now in the Bay Area?
I have to comment first, I think, on the blues scene nationally and internationally, because we do still a lot of shows in the Bay Area. We got to be careful that we are not overdoing the Bay Area because we live here. It's convenient and we have a lot of fans and friends here. It's easy to do gigs here, but we got to be careful that we don't do too many and oversaturate the market. You space things out. Like the last time we played was June out at the Rancho. And so this next time we're playing is all the way here into September. So we've got to kind of spread things out like that. But for the most part, we're on our bus touring around the country or getting on a plane and flying to mostly Europe. These days we do other countries. We were in Brazil last year. It's national touring. It's international touring. And then, of course, we love to come home to the Bay Area where we have most of our friends and family. You remember how like in the middle 80s, you had Stevie Ray Vaughan hit those airwaves, and you had Robert Cray on the radio, and Bonnie Raitt. Albert Collins even had records getting on mainstream rock and roll radio. It was kind of a blues explosion. The one before that, I remember, was in the 60s with Michael Bloomfield, the Electric Flag, Taj Mahal, Albert King, everybody was still alive. So there were blues shows and blues concerts and festivals, and it was a real strong scene in the 60s. Kind of went away for a while and then came back in the 80s, 90s. We enjoyed those times, kind of where we got our start. We're playing around the Bay Area, making a little noise. And then got the attention of a record label and some management and booking agent. And we put a record out. We hit the road, and we've been doing it for the last 30 years.
Yeah, right.
That's where it started. It all started coming up, us playing around in North Beach and San Francisco. And we'd make it to Marin County once in a while. We would play something like New George's. Of course, the Mystic Theater in Petaluma.
Of course, yeah.
That was we did every New Year's Eve there for a long time. Everything that we're doing now is a result of that real strong blues scene that was going on in the Bay Area at the time. Now it's coming up again.
Right.
There's a really strong blues audience, and I'm not really sure how these things go and how they come about. They just do kind of organically and naturally. And we've got a great blues audience. There's some people that just won't miss a show. And we love those guys. They're out every time we play, or anybody.
Thanks for keeping the blues alive here in the Bay Area. Really appreciate it. I want to play another track from A Bluesman Came to Town. What can you tell us about the song Somewhere?
It was one of the first songs I wrote when I came up with this concept. I decided that it would be a story based on a hero's journey. And I had just read a book called The Alchemist and enjoyed that a lot. And I used that kind of as a template for A Bluesman Came to Town. In the hero's journey, typically you've got a young guy that's wanting to go out, make his fortune, or go on an adventure, or he's being called to do something with his life. And usually stumbles across a sage, a mentor, a wise man, a wise guy, or something like that. Somebody that advises him and mentors him. And then when he's ready, he goes out and does his thing. And of course, during that time, he runs into all kinds of difficulty and challenges and obstacles and cyclopses and everything you could think of to get to the other side. And then he winds up at the other end of the story, learning some lessons and finding out that the real treasure and the real value of that whole experience was more of an inside job, and not so much finding the pot of gold or the treasure as it was the inside understanding of what was important in life. And that is what he gets out of it, And so tried to write a story based on those ideas and about a blues guy, somehow tying it all into the blues.
Wow. You had your hands full there.
Yeah. So Somewhere in the Middle of the Nowhere was the first song that I wrote. And it basically sets up this kid that's, let's say he's living out in the rural part of the state, and he's going to probably take over the family farm one day, marry his high school sweetheart. His life is pretty good. It's all laid out for him. But at night, he lays awake thinking about adventure and doing something else.
Cool.
One day, a blues man comes to town and plays a local joint, and then he gets exposed to the blues. And that's where the journey starts. Is he finds out that's what he wants to do with his life and goes out on this blues man's journey.
What a great intro, Tommy. Thank you. That's
a long one, I know.
It's a long one, but it works. Yeah. Let's listen to it now. This is Somewhere by Tommy Castro, and you're listening to Backstage Sonoma.
Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a young man listens to the night. Way out here in the country, the moon and stars big and wide, just like this old countryside. And we're up high where the eagle flies. That's where his spirit lies. He wants to run far as it can and hitch a ride or hop a train. Other places and other faces where nobody knows his name. It's in his head, man, it's just a dream. Oh, he knows he's gotta stay. But even a poor boy's dream might come true one of these days. His heart is open, big and wide, like this old countryside. And way up high where the eagle flies, man, that's where his spirit lies. Oh, yeah. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a young man listens to the night. We're out here in the country, the moon and stars are the only light. He takes his rest when he can. Soon the morning comes, and every day is like the last until it's done. I say every day is like the last until it's done.
Blues guitarist Tommy Castro is our guest today. Tommy, I understand you have a new album in the works. I don't know if you can talk about it, but is there anything you can share?
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited about this. I'll add a little something to that. We got new management in the last year, and me and my new manager have a plan that's a 2-record plan for now. And a record coming out soon is going to be something I always wanted to do. Just play make a straight up blues album because almost everything we've ever done has been on a little bit on the contemporary side. We take our traditional blues, our R&B and soul influence, rock and roll, mix all of that stuff together and come up with our sound. But in my love of traditional low down blues, the real deal stuff, Buddy Guy and Muddy Waters, Ray Charles, and there's a long list of artists that inspire me.
Yeah.
And so I've always wanted to do just like a straight up blues album. And so that's what this next one's going to be. It's about half covers, half originals in that same vein. And it's basically a traditional blues album, no rock blues, real R&B and soul music or funk or any of those kind of things. It's just a low down blues record. And I really had a great time making it. And we made it with Kid Anderson from Greaseland Studios down in San Jose. Of course, Bluesman was something I went to Nashville to work with Tom Hambridge and that whole scene over there. And this one, I just brought it back home into the greasiest, funkiest place I know. And that's Greaseland Studios in San Jose with the genius of Kid Anderson. He's the guitar player for Rick Estrin and the Nightcats. He's also just a genius of all things blues music. And so we cut the record there, and that'll be coming out February. That should be a lot of fun, especially for the people in our group that are really serious blues fans.
Yeah. Do you have a working title in mind?
Closer to the Bone.
Closer to the Bone. I like it. Yeah. Nice.
And the thing of that album I decided to do was to record a few from my friends. And the Bay Area's grand poobah of the blues back in the day was Johnny Nitro, was a good friend of mine in North Beach. And he's not with us anymore. Also, Ron Thompson was a great blues artist from the Bay Area, recorded one of his songs. There's also a nod to some of the cats that are not as well known around the world, but every bit as bona fide as a blues artist as anybody.
Well, good. Let's talk about your upcoming show at the Hop Monk in Novato. What can fans look forward to?
We just like to have a good time. I mean, when we're playing a hometown gig like that, we have so many of our friends. How can I say this? There's people that started to come and see us play 30 years, and their lives went through whatever journeys they went on. And some of them kind of went away and came back. Some of them kept coming out the whole time, depending on what was going on with them. But it seems like now everybody who's ever been to a show in the past is back at it. There was a time when the scene wasn't as strong in the Bay Area, but now it seems like everybody, maybe their kids grew up or their grandkids grew up. I don't know, but they're all back out coming to shows. And so we've got friends that we've known for 30 years. We've got new people that came along recently. We've got people who jumped on board 10 years ago, 20 years ago along the way. And so when I look out there, it's kind of a story of my life for the last 30 years. And it's really wonderful because we have this connection with people. They brought their kids to the show. And now their kids are adults. Maybe bringing their kids to the show.
Sounds like a really fun event. And let me remind our listeners, you can catch Tommy Castro and the Painkillers at the Hop Monk Tavern in Novato on September 22nd. Showtime is 6 p.m. And you can find tickets on kcturnerpresents.com. And be sure to stop by Tommy's website for his music and show schedule, TommyCastro.com. Tommy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate your time. And see everybody out at the Hop Monk.
Backstage Sonoma will be right back after this quick break.
Welcome to Backstage Sonoma, your all-access pass to the heartbeat of the Bay Area music scene. From jazz to rock, blues to world music, we bring you intimate conversations with the artists shaping our soundscape. Hear their stories, explore their inspirations, and dive deep into the creative process that makes each performance unforgettable. Hosted by Steve Roby, seasoned radio personality and best-selling author, Backstage Sonoma has featured Grammy winners like Judy Collins, Colby Kyle Lott, Leslie Mendelsohn, and chart-topping guitarist Adam Hawley. With over 200 episodes and 4 years of exclusive content, we keep you connected to the local and touring musicians making waves today. Whether you're a lifelong music lover or discovering new tunes, join us on Backstage Sonoma. Available on all major streaming platforms, including YouTube. Don't miss a beat, subscribe now, and be part of our growing community of listeners. Backstage Sonoma, where the music never stops.
Thanks for listening to the Backstage Sonoma podcast. Join us next time for more great interviews and music from local and touring musicians. You can find us on the web at backstagesonoma.com.